Welcome back. So, we just spent the last video talking about myth, and now what we're going to talk about is sacred history. What is sacred history? These are stories that place the sacred within historical persons and or events. Now, the perfect example of sacred history is what's represented by the bottom image. If that's kind of a modernistic portrayal of, anybody? The Exodus experience. That's a kind of a modern thing, I know. Okay, so what is the Exodus, you remember? Okay, that's when Moses, that long drawn out story, where Moses went to Pharaoh and told Pharaoh that he had to set his people free, right? The Hebrews, and lead them to the promised land. Now, why is this called sacred history? Because we have these stories, part of the absolute, the ultimate, the holy, but yet they are partly historically verified. Reason being, we know for a fact that pharaohs used to govern ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt, that's archaeology, right? That's bona fide, right? Know for a fact that the pyramids and all those palaces and amazing buildings which still stand today were built with slave labor, right? So that's when we have this combination of the real, the historical, and then it's kind of merged in with that mythic element to give us sacred history. Another narrative style are parables, and the representation is from that top image there, right? That's the parable of the Good Samaritan. What parables are, they are teaching stories. In addition, we have poetry. What is poetry? Poetry is connotative language often set to music. Now, that word connotative might be familiar from English class. That was when you were growing up in high school and so forth. That's called ELA. Connotative language is the opposite of denotative language. Denotative language, the easy way to remember is that the D in denotative language stands for dictionary. That's the actual definition. But with connotative language, that's the implied meaning. So poetry is full of implied meaning and figurative language. And back in the day, poems were often set to music. And the perfect example of this would be in the Hebrew Bible. That's what Christians refer to as the Old Testament, the book of Psalms, right? We have those recorded on paper, and they're poems. But during the time that they were sung, there were songs, but we don't have the music, but we still have the words. So that's poetry. And then the last type of narrative style is wisdom literature. What's wisdom literature? Those are collections of aphorisms that give advice or teach. And the perfect example of wisdom literature that most people are familiar with is the book of Proverbs, which is in the Hebrew Bible. That's a perfect example of wisdom literature. Just it's a collection, right? A collection of little short sayings that are meant to give advice as well as teach. So now let's dive deeper into each of these different narrative styles. So the next slide, get there myself, there we go. The next slide, we're going to dig even deeper into myth. Now, myth often uses symbolism. What is symbolism? Symbolism is when a known object represents something unknown and often greater. Okay, what is symbolism? When a known object represents something unknown and often greater. And the perfect example of symbolism is this. Nope, it wasn't this one, it was this one, right? What is this? This is my wedding band. This is a symbol. And by the way, our lives are full of symbols, and oftentimes people are not aware of it. So, what is, again, the wedding band. So this is something known that's being used to represent something unknown and greater. And everybody's familiar with the wedding band. So then we take those things we know about it, the object known, and it helps us to understand that which is unknown and greater. Right? A wedding band is circular. It's made out of a precious metal, and it was a gift, and we put it on the ring finger, right? All those different things. That helps us to understand that thing which is unknown and greater, which is marriage and the love that binds a marriage. So we take those characteristics of the known, we use them to understand the unknown, right? So love, like a circle, has no beginning, has no end. It's eternal. Right? Have you ever wondered why are wedding bands and rings made out of expensive, really costly metals? That's to represent that love is priceless. It's of great value. In addition, you cannot earn a wedding band. It's a gift, right? For instance, when I proposed to my wife, that wedding band was a gift. And when you receive a gift, you have two options. Yes or no. Right? You cannot earn a gift. It's freely given, but the recipient can refuse it. Now, doesn't we know why this finger is called the ring finger? Because way back in the day, people thought that if you lost this finger, right, that there was a vein that led directly to your heart and you would die. Now today we know this to be false, that if you do lose your ring finger, you'll go to the hospital, they'll stop the bleeding and you'll be fine. But that's why they put the wedding band on the ring finger, was to symbolize that if you were to lose that ring, it would cost you your life. So now, how does this tie in with the image there under symbolism? Well, you'll see a shepherd here holding a sheep. Does anybody know anything about, it's probably starting to ring some bells, that sheep often used to symbolize people. Now, why would sheep often be used to symbolize people? Well, the shepherd, right? The good shepherd, that's the person, hopefully it's starting to click in, some bells starting to ring from the past. The good shepherd, the shepherd cares for his sheep. Without the shepherd, what do sheep do? They wander around and become lost. But then what does the shepherd do? Goes after the sheep, even if it's one. Now, interesting thing about sheep, I had a student quite a few years ago who kept sheep, lived on a ranch, and she said something that's really, really fascinating about sheep, and that they are dumb. She said that they are incredibly dumb. And that also, helps to describe us, human beings. We are really knuckleheaded. We do just catastrophically dumb things over and over and over again. But thankfully, that good shepherd is there to reach out to us and lead us back to the flock time and time again. So, what we're going to do in the next lecture is finish up the right-hand side of this slide with that word archetypes.